One of the rare occasions where I am in conversation with a fellow colleague. Hello, Nayanima, how are you?
Good, thank you. Thank you for having me, Abhi.
You are watching as well as listening to ABP Life podcast. I'm Abi Lairi. Joining me today in conversation is Nayanima Basu with a brand new book, The Fall of Kabul. This is basically a book on how the Taliban actually took over the entire country and how people escaped from there. She was apparently on ground there reporting for a news publication. I guess you were with The Print. The Print. And she works in the capacity of an international editor, international affairs editor for ABP Life. Welcome to the podcast. How are you?
Good, thank you so much, Abhi. It's a pleasure to be in your program, which is a super hit.
I beg to differ on that, but I guess hardly 5 people watches the entire episode.
No.
You will be the 6th one, and if you manage to spread across the word, maybe 50, 60 more people. What exactly the book is all about? Let's talk about that first, and then we'll dig deep into the conversation.
So it's basically on my reportage there. I've always been a ground reportage kind of a journalist. You can say it's a traditional form of journalism, but that's what I've always believed in. And so I thought in August 2021, when so much was going on around Afghanistan, and I was actually reporting that city in Delhi, I thought, let's just go there if there is a possibility. And people were going there, journalists were going there, but mostly from TV. There were hardly any ground report as such happening because they were mostly getting embedded with armed forces in Afghanistan, and they were mostly showing the war. But then I thought that's really one side of it. There's a human-centric aspect to it. There's many more layers that we as readers sitting in India, people were interested to know, but they were not getting those details. So thankfully, I had a good editor at that time who said that, okay, if you're up for it, let's go for it. And he gave me that support and I went there. But the basic idea that I had in my mind was to cover the NATO withdrawal, right? Okay. What had happened in 1989 when the Soviets withdrew from Afghanistan, and, one could see those Soviet tanks rolling down Kabul roads. I thought I'll get, visuals like that. It'll be a good story, for a multimedia journalist as you are. You would know how important it is these days to have, video also to your stories. So I thought it'll be a good visual, but then little did I know at that point of time that the Taliban would actually come in and there will be a withdrawal, NATO withdrawal, of course, but then that will happen at a much later date. Although the date was set for 30th of August, but 31st, but then the problem was nobody really expected the Taliban to come over. But then when I landed there, and that we can discuss
But
later,
people were speculating that Taliban may actually infiltrate.
Yes, so that's what I was coming to. I mean, people at that time, we were hearing some reports from the US media that they had intelligence that Taliban would come in. But then, at least in South Asia, Afghanistan's own neighbor, India, and the neighborhood, the Central Asian countries, I think they thought there'll be some deal that will happen between the Ashraf Ghani government at that point, the Republic government, and the Taliban. But that didn't happen, of course.
And it was a chaos. It was a chaos. We saw, like everybody across the globe saw, some really bad footages from that place. I remember that people actually crawling across the aeroplanes and just flying out of the aeroplane, and those kind of and those kind of visuals, a lot of publications actually posted with trigger warnings because they were not at all the visuals which anybody would expect out of that place. How was your experience when you actually stepped into Kabul? You landed in Kabul. How was the entire experience? Because when I was going through the book, firstly a couple of embassies closed. The Indian embassy closed a couple of its chapter. Then finally it closed the Kabul one.
So I've given a description of, the days that I was there. I didn't want to make it an academic book because, you have millions of books on Afghanistan. So I just wanted to give the flavor at that point of time in that country and how many of us, and not just India, but other countries also went wrong in analyzing what was actually going on, or maybe underestimating the fact that there's this stereotypical thinking we have, the Taliban are these ragtag, boys, what will they do? But then we forgot somewhere down the line that these are the same Taliban men who sat across the table with America and did the Doha deal, 2 years before that. So when I landed in Kabul in August 8, I could sense the tensed atmosphere there. People were not at all, in that mood to even think that there could be some deal. They were very clear from the very beginning, at least people on the ground, like the kebab sellers that you get everywhere, the bread sellers on the road, the normal fruit vendors, they would say, okay, yes, they are coming, so we know they're there, they're already there. But yet, if you come to the the elite pocket of Kabul, where this five-star hotel, I was living in, staying in the Serena Hotel, which is one of the best there and the safest. So there was this gang of reporters, international reporters. They were think tankers, they were NGO activists and workers who said that this is all farce. Taliban is not going to come. The US will do something. The Ashraf Ghani government is going to have a deal with them. And the deal, the negotiation was going on parallelly in Doha. But at that point of time, everybody thought that Doha will do something. Some magic will happen before 30th of August, and maybe things will be under control. But yes, as you rightly said, those tragic scenes that we saw from the airport, and I was that time sitting inside the airport, hoping to catch a flight back to India. But then that's like the last leg of my trip there. Before that, also the way the tragedy was unfolding in Afghanistan is something nobody really saw at that point happening. Because the international media was mostly focused in Kabul. B, there was this war going on. The war was raging at that point of time between Afghan forces and the Taliban. And we saw how Afghan forces was also collapsing because the NATO troops had stopped giving support, especially the American troops. And of course, the fact that how Mazar-e-Sharif fell 2 days before Kabul, and how provinces and their capitals were falling. Either they were surrendering the provincial heads, or forces were just giving up arms. And so those scenes were much more tragic than, of course, the airport scene is what really unleashed the sorrow. But before that also, it was complete chaos across Afghanistan.
And you spent around close to 12, 13 days there, right?
Around 10, 11
Around
days.
10, 11 days. But certainly you have covered the issue, you have covered Afghanistan as a whole for quite some time after that also. How do you think the people actually reacted to the entire Taliban taking over the country? There is certainly a curtailment of the human rights. A lot of people are scared because they won't be able to, women were especially scared because now Taliban is there, we won't be able to do this, that, a lot of things. A lot of conversation in the global forum were taking place. How do you see when you speak to, what exactly is the reaction of all those people or the locals when you spoke to them?
So I'll tell you, Afghanistan is a very interesting place where you don't see uniformity in anything.
Okay.
So just this small pocket in Kabul, which is a very elite pocket, as I said, like we have in Delhi. The way Delhi thinks, the rest of India doesn't think like that. And the rest of Afghanistan is extremely rural, although yes, some of the places like Mazar-e-Sharif is a trading hub, but even then they have a very conventional way of looking at things. And when I went to Mazar-e-Sharif in this 10, 11 days, because I wanted to see an actual, frontline war, and I covered that between the Afghan forces and the Taliban, fighters there. Villages after villages were burnt down, evacuated, and nobody knows where those men and women, the children went. So the thing is, they were very clear that the Taliban would come and we will accept them. Because they see Taliban as it's a part of Afghan society, right? The Taliban is, it's born from within the Afghan society.
Yes.
So they some of them call them as their own brothers. So, I was a little taken aback, and maybe that was a learning for me at that point of time when they said, and I was in Mazar-e-Sharif covering the war, and I was wearing my bulletproof jacket and my helmet and all of that. And I was standing in front of the Blue Mosque in Mazar-e-Sharif, and somebody came and said, and I was doing a P2C. So somebody said that, why are you wearing all this, fancy bulletproof jackets? Whom are you scared of? Taliban is our own brother. They are not going to kill you if we are not killing you. So, they were as direct as that. Then the Imam of that Blue Mosque clearly told me that, yes, they are going to come in the next, maybe they'll come tonight or they'll come tomorrow. What have the Americans given us? What have the Russians given us? what has even the Ashraf Ghani government, or before that the Hamid Karzai government, what has these two governments have given us. So let them also come in, give them another chance. The Americans need to leave. So there was that kind of thinking, but of course there was this another thinking that the Taliban made it very clear that they'll rule the country as per the Sharia law. But now we see, after three years down the line, three and a half years, is the fact that they are. I mean, Kabul is being ruled from Kandahar. Kandahar is where their premier sits, Habatullah Khunzada, and he follows this ancient Sharia law, with under which they have stopped women's education completely, not just for primary school girls, entire girls' education. Women are now removed from all sorts of professional setup that you see there, be it in the government jobs or private jobs. But then the other aspect also is that schools that are still on, where the boys are going, even they are not being taught the modern syllabus. They've all changed it. They are now, what I get to hear from some of the former Afghan diplomats whom I'm still in touch with, they tell me that modern schools are now like modern madrasas. They are not being taught anything contemporary. So that is
No
also a bigger
science,
burden.
no politics, no nothing.
At all. So, as a collateral thing to that, there has been now an emergence of secret schools that some of the activists run. But then that's not really the way the country should be moving. Economy has completely collapsed. We recently, Afghanistan had this massive floods, and there had been so many deaths. They're running on aid. If there is no aid coming, then they will be completely impoverished, and then there is malnourishment. It's in a complete state of collapse. So now comes the question: how much will the world deal with the Taliban? If this is the new reality, whether you should deal with them or not, or recognize them or not. So that's now the bigger question.
I have a question which is slightly different from this. A couple of years, or maybe like a year back, I don't know whether this was real or fake or whatever. There was a video of like Taliban invented a new supercar or something like that, which is this fast, this and that. Was that just a propaganda, or they are actually invested a lot of amount in technology and advancement and a lot of
No,
stuff?
I would say that was propaganda to some extent.
Okay.
Yes, there is a lot of money they are getting from of course, from their leaders sitting in Doha. But then, end of the day, they do not believe in that kind of technology. Even if they do, that's only for their own purpose. They don't have really a kind of a vision how they'll take those forward. That car, I think, was kind of a propaganda, because end of the day, they got everything that the international troops left there, including the weapons and the choppers that we see them operating. But yeah, interestingly, they do have a lot of money. We see the Taliban foreign minister roaming around in private jet, Amir Khan Muttaqi. So, and people are, countries are dealing with them. But end of the day, the question is, how will you sort of, see to it that they do good for the country? And I think in that, the most important player right now is China. China is investing heavily there.
Yeah.
China has maintained a sort of normalcy in the sense exchange of diplomats and all that. I think seeing that India is also making its inroads, India is probably planning to restart some of its infrastructure projects there. So I think it's a kind of a concern area and a strategic concern that will remain for a very long time to come.
Okay. Let's go back again to Kabul.
Sure.
What kind of visuals or what kind of strange things which you witnessed from an on-ground reporter's point of view, which you never thought can actually happen in this world when you were reporting and when actually Taliban took over the entire place?
So I'll tell you, when the Taliban took over, immediately after that, my office at that time was more concerned that I should be coming back and they should not target Indian journalists, because we did see a photographer from Reuters, Danish, getting killed there. So my office was very concerned at that point of time when the Taliban took over that you should come back. But before that, some of the things that I see that time I saw in Kabul was how the international journalists sort of operate, how Afghans have become very smart in dealing with media and journalists, because they live and breathe war. War has become their, you like it or not, a kind of a business that
It's a
goes
way of
on.
life for them.
That's their way of life, and the way they have accepted it, their resilience is amazing. I mean, I was very touched seeing that, in the sense that it doesn't matter to them that okay, a war is going on. We've lived, our generations have lived right from the 19th century when the Great Game actually started.
I feel sad listening to this.
I know. So when I was starting from here, some of the Afghan diplomats in the embassy here, when they gave me the visa, they said, okay, now go and enjoy Kabul. Kabul is a world-class city. So I thought, okay. When I reached Kabul, I saw on the roads these young boys, about 12, 13, 9, about my son's age. They were selling boiled eggs and water bottle. They don't beg, because that's against your Pathan or Pashtun culture.
Okay.
So they don't really, lay their hands and beg, but then they will sell something to you. They're extremely poor, yet they'll, have that professional demeanor on them, which is very moving. And I thought, that's the quality Afghans have. And that's how they deal with the media also. When you cannot roam in Afghanistan all alone. You have to have a guide with you. In the sense, maybe your driver. Let's say you hire a cab. That cab, when I hired a similar cab in Mazar-e-Sharif, I'll tell you, the chauffeur, he reported the first day and he said, "Aap India se aayi hain?" I said, "Yes," and he knew Hindi. I was very glad that somebody knows Hindi. Then he said, "India bahut acha lagta hai." And of course, I've mentioned in my book several times how Shah Rukh Khan
is a phenomenon there.
Completely. I mean, you say Shah Rukh Khan and you're saved from every danger in that country.
Shah Rukh Khan, if you're watching this, thank you.
So yeah, and he came with an old AK-47 rifle, an internet,
Modem kind of a thing.
Model kind of a thing, a Wi-Fi, this thing, and he said, "You want internet? I'll give you. You need protection? I'll give you. I carry a rifle. You need interpretation? I'll do that." And all that package is about $100 a day. So they know it, and you can't say no, because when you're in a place like Mazar-e-Sharif, you need the internet.
True.
You also need protection. You also need somebody to interpret what the...
And I guess they have been dealing with journalists in and out of their life,
completely.
right? And on a regular basis, everybody is going there. But this was a very different scenario. Nobody expected this happened after decades, right? This was a very...
Yes, I mean, after since the war started in 20 years, this is the first time when the Taliban came in. But then again, there's this young generation who really were brought up in that American style of things. I feel very unfortunate for the youngsters there, because their parents or their grandparents still know what Afghanistan, the original Afghanistan is or was. But then the youngsters who were born after the Americans came in, they inherited that, especially in Kabul. I mean, looking at those soldiers, they inherited those, the style of wearing the cap or the glasses and the watch and all of that. And so they became very stylish in that manner.
Now everything changes.
Now everything changes for them. And it's very difficult. So if you see when this influx, the mass exodus sort of happened after the takeover, it's mostly the youngsters who've left. Within the age range, I would say from 19 to 35, in a way. People who, when the war started in 2001 after 9/11, some of them who were, let's say, 10 years old, even they don't remember what had, how the previous Afghanistan used to look like under Taliban, when they used to rule there, earlier. But then that was for, just 5 years. But so, they feel a little lost. And the fact that, they thought that with the help of America, they can reach somewhere in their life. They also believed in India. Unfortunately, we've stopped taking Afghan students. We've not been taking them at all. We used to give them a lot of scholarships, which we stopped. We revoked some of the visas of the students who were supposed to come there at that year and take up their courses. So, I guess these are some of the questions in the future people need to be worried about, especially in India needs to address that, how going forward you will create those kind of, people-to-people linkages.
And how do you see the future? Do you see a silver lining anywhere?
Well, as far as Afghanistan is concerned, it's in a very, I think that's the most I think the tragedy there is absolutely endless. Maybe a Russia-Ukraine war will also stop with the intervention of the West. Maybe Israel-Hamas will also stop one day. But what is happening with Afghanistan, I think it's very unfortunate. And the fact that people, as I've mentioned in my book, Afghanistan has always been this, country's the most interesting battlefield. Any country, be it Russia, be it Russians, be it British, be it Americans, they just felt that, okay, if we need to play this sort of video game called war, let's just go to Afghanistan and play, without thinking what's happening to the people there, to the women there. And what to say of children. I mean, I have no words to even think. Some of the children that I met in one school in Mazar-e-Sharif, those little girls, they don't go to school anymore. I don't know what they're even doing, if they're even surviving. I think the future, there is no silver lining unless we start to talk and deal with Taliban and tell them to follow some of the promises they made under the Doha deal. But then again, that happened under the previous Donald
What kind
Trump
of promises
administration.
for all the audience? What kind of promises?
So that's the deal that the Taliban did with Donald Trump administration in 2020 February, that they said that they'll follow international norms, they'll have an inclusive government where they will address their ethnic divide. Now, their ethnic divide is also a big concern that Afghans themselves need to solve.
Okay.
The domination of Pashtuns there has to stop. The Hazara genocide has to stop. So the Taliban had promised that if they ever come to power, they'll do an inclusive government, including women in it, which they have not done. They have gone back to their old, mode of punishing, public execution, flogging of women, and all of that. That has to stop. You cannot go back to Stone Age, and you have to follow a rule that the global order is based on. So those are the basic promises that they have done. Until and unless they follow that, it will be very difficult for any country to deal with them openly.
It's becoming more like a North Korea now? It has become already a North Korea?
I would say North Korea is still in a better position. I mean, if you go to North Korea...
There's no wars and tanks.
There's no wars and tanks. And yes, you have an extremely authoritarian regime, but end of the day, they have a system following, They have education going on. Yes, they are repressed, but then that's, again, could be our point of view. Maybe they are not. I have not been to North Korea, so I wouldn't know, but they're in a much better state than what Afghanistan is.
There's worse than North Korea.
Yes, of course. I mean, they're worse than in any this thing. And also the kind of geography where Afghanistan is located is also very kind of a place where we've seen there's been tensions and ethnic tensions and wars since ages, right? Right from the Mongol period and even before that. So that area is so sort of volatile and vulnerable that I don't think they'll ever be in their best position. But yes, we need to. The world cannot ignore Afghanistan. Also, that's a lesson that we should learn. And that's what we should all follow. That
place is, I guess, a cash cow of resources. It's a cash cow of human power as well, since we are talking. And I feel sad about the people who are actually living there and their life had to take an entire 180-degree turn just because the Taliban intruded. On that note, बहुत shukriya for having this conversation. For all those people who really want to dig deep into this journey, how Naeema discovered all the truths from her ground reporting, just read this book, The Fall of Kabul. This can be bought online, I guess?
Yes.
Bought online. Also,
on the bookstores.
On the bookstores near you. So yeah, happy reading. Bye-bye. Thank you.
Thank you.